I've been preaching this message from the very first moment I turned this camera on back in 2021, and it will be the final message that I leave when I have my very last recording session, hopefully in the very, very, very far future. And that message is this: personal accountability is the pathway to freedom. There is no other way to get to a point of personal success, whatever that looks like and means for you, and whatever area that may be. Personal accountability. To account for your own decisions, good, bad, and indifferent, and to choose to make different decisions, which is personal agency. If you are unable to take personal responsibility for your own decisions, I promise you, you will live as a victim to circumstance. Simple as that. If you don't take accountability over your money, somebody else will control your money. If you don't take personal responsibility over your mind, somebody else will have your mind. And so that being said, I want to get into this video of one of the most brilliant minds in all of human history. We need to make sure that our education system starts to educate again and have individuals such as Thomas Sowell introduced into curriculum. So that being said, let's get into this video, starting with a quote right here, which is in direct alignment with my entire mission statement. And this reads, "The great escape of our time is escape from personal responsibility for the consequences of one's own behavior." Let's get into it.
The great escape of our times is escape from personal responsibility. Close quote. What do you mean?
Oh, I think that the idea of personal responsibility is more or less off the table. It's passé in many places. Again, going back to, say, the housing situation, that people took out mortgages that they couldn't afford, and that now people who didn't take out mortgages they couldn't afford are now expected to pay to bail them out. It's insane.
But you don't. They were duped by dishonest mortgage brokers. No?
Oh, there was enough dishonesty to go around. We needn't single out mortgage brokers. No, that's the narrative. The fact of the matter is that speculators took advantage. See, these things are put in these laws and policies are put into place, saying this is going to help the poor and the downtrodden. But the question is, who actually benefits from this? Speculators benefited from this more than any poor or any downtrodden. A speculator could come in, claim any income he wanted to claim in order to buy 3 or 4 houses. Nobody would verify the income. He would get them at teaser rates like 2% per year. And he didn't worry about that going up later because he was going to sell a house.
Nobody forced me to buy anything that I own. Nobody. Every terrible decision that I've made financially was a decision that I made, right? And I know there's some folks out there who may be able to say, well, I mean, technically my spouse bought that, right? Technically my spouse influenced me to buy that thing. Unless it was them swiping that credit card, debit card, or whatever it may be, and the purchase was made by self, it doesn't matter what external pressures there may be. We made the decision. And the reason I bring this up is this. We as humans seem to use any sort of tactic to evade personal accountability on just about everything. It's like, oh, the reason I'm obese is not because I've been putting junk into my body and I haven't been moving enough. It's because I have been tricked by the bamboozlers that are big food and big ag and, the food pyramid. That is a lie. If it wasn't for them, I would not be in this condition here. As opposed to, yes, there are tricksters, there are hucksters, there are individuals who make entire careers off of getting you to take certain actions. However, if you do not take dominion over your own mind, you will be got and you are leaving yourself susceptible to be influenced. This is still a personal decision. This is, again, it's not an easy message to receive because most people are comfortable blaming everybody else for their own personal decisions. I remember seeing this meme. It's one of them type that you have to save and keep in the arsenal just in case. You know what I mean? You just got to, boom, whip it out on somebody. No diddy. And it's 2 frames. So one is a crowd and there's a man on stage and he's like, who wants change? And everybody has their hand up. Me, right? And then the other frame is who wants to change? And you see like everybody just looking at themselves, no hands up. That's essentially what it is. When it comes time to actually do something about the change, right? We want the government to change. And so we elect certain officials and they're supposed to do their job. Unfortunately, we've allowed for so much corruption to happen and go unchecked, which we now are checking. But even with whoever may be in office, like, God forbid if a Skamala had ended up in office, I know that I still have to do things necessary for me and my people in order to make sure that we're good and we're taken care of. Even if that means moving to another country, whatever it may be, there's still a personal aspect. And it's mostly the personal decisions that I'm making that are going to lead to the outcome necessary, right? What do we have to do? Where do we have to be in order to make things happen? And this is a conversation we have to start having if we're going to change our lives for the better. It is not who can do what for me, right? Many people call out the welfare system and people who milk and leech off the welfare system. But we may have a version of that within our own lives where we're waiting for somebody to do something. Maybe your job, your employer, we're waiting for the handout. We're waiting for somebody to do something different in order for our lives to change. We're waiting on, somebody to come up out the clouds to change our lives when we have been given the God-given power to change the trajectory and the direction of our lives. We have to take dominion, authority over our lives. Keyword author. We write our own script. And when we negate that and we blame, he's speaking on the 2007-2008 market crash. And it's like, oh, the hucksters, the bankers, look, these evil people who forced us into buying things we couldn't afford. No, they were definitely finessing, but they're only able to finesse the finessable. So if you are willing to buy something like a house, purchase a $500,000 home, and your income wasn't even 10% of what could actually afford that home, you still made the personal decision. It's incredible. It's like since childhood, we've had this fear of taking responsibility because maybe for some of us, a lot of us, it meant punishment. And so that subconscious story plays to say, if I take personal accountability, it means I'm going to be punished. Guess what? The worst punishment as an adult is the consequences of a bad decision. So you might as well take accountability and do something different. When you take accountability or responsibility, it allows you to move different. But I digress. Let's get back into it.
Up later because he was going to sell a house beforehand. And so a lot of that was in there. The other thing is that it's a very complicated financial situation. But the cold fact is, if the mortgages had continued to be paid, we wouldn't have had the mortgage crisis. So the fundamental reason for the crisis is that the mortgages weren't paid, and the fundamental reason they weren't paid is that they were made under conditions that made it unlikely that they would ever be repaid. And you knew that going in.
Right. Losing a sense of personal responsibility, you're right, in dismantling America places, quote, a whole society in jeopardy. How is that the case? How do you draw a line from the mortgage crisis to the dismantling of the entire country?
Well, I think if you don't have a sense of personal responsibility, and what you have is the government taking money from people who are personally responsible and giving it to people who are irresponsible, or in other cases corrupt, that's not a viable situation for the long term.
I read something the other day. It said, your system is truly broken when those who work are punished and those who leech are rewarded. And that's this kind of Marxist far left politics that has seeped into almost all of America, right? Where we are basically allowing for a sort of welfare state. And, we're lying to ourselves, or maybe not you and I individually, but they're individuals who lie to themselves about what socialism is, even though they live in a free market capitalistic society. And if they really believe that much in socialism, they would move to a socialistic nation, a genuinely socialistic. And I don't want to hear these arguments about Denmark and Sweden and, you know what I mean? Like my girl's in the EU. I've had, quite a bit of time in the EU. I have family who are in the UK, etc. And there's some of these nations which people say, well, look at they're socialists. No, most of them are representative democracies, and they have kind of these hybrid systems. And you may have fractions that are socialist, but those aren't the ones in charge. And we see where that goes. We see what happened to Canada, which looked like it was thriving. Everybody was talking about the healthcare system in Canada. Look how incredible the healthcare system is. Now you have people driving from Canada into the United States to get a medical appointment because the waiting list is 2 weeks up to 2 months for some of these individuals, right? Again, that's not the point at hand, but it's to say that we've allowed for a system that essentially eggs on the individuals who aren't really doing a damn thing, aren't really contributing. And that honestly wraps all around this thing of personal accountability and responsibility. We have to hold ourselves and others responsible and accountable for the decisions that we make and the outcomes that we get. I know it seems unfair. You think to yourself sometimes, man, but people succeed and they don't really do nothing. They're not even that smart. They're not this. But guess what? The marketplace rewarded them for whatever they put out. You may think that little widget or whatever it is useless. There's a lot of things I think are not valuable. I don't think Coca-Cola is valuable. I think Coca-Cola is trash, right? That's my own God honest opinion. But there are people who love Coca-Cola. And so the market rewards Coke as a company because people are buying it for whatever given reason. Nobody's getting forced to drink a Coca-Cola. They are making the decision to do so. And so the marketplace is rewarding that. And that's the sort of the ideology that I stand behind. Even if I don't like the product you're selling, I believe there should be a free market. Individuals should be able to choose what they're purchasing, but also know the consequences. Back to the point that Brother Sowell is making, which is there are people who bought homes that they could not afford, and they knew they couldn't afford, and they knew the stipulations, and they said, because I can, I will, right? This sense of instant gratification, swiping the credit card and going on a vacation you can't afford. When am I going to pay this off? I don't know, but I want to go on this vacation. It's like, again, it's unfortunate that we're so given over to the mentality that if I don't have it now, I'm not complete. Right? There's an inner void that most are perpetually looking to fill with external things. And so if I can't have that thing now, then, I'm going to throw a hissy fit, or I'm going to find some way to get it, even though I actually can't afford it. And then I'm going to pay for the consequences down the road. Then I'm going to blame the system, for why I don't, I now have to pay $20,000, $30,000, even the college, the university system. Right? We want to call it unfair and unjust and all these other things, but there's still a decision made by somebody to take out those loans. And it's like these loans cannot be defaulted on. So if you cannot pay them, you cannot pay them. There's no guarantee. When you go to university, it's not a guarantee you're going to get a job because you have a degree. That may be the programming and the conditioning, but the reality, you got to look at the facts. And yes, having an 18-year-old making such decisions is foolish. It is unwise. And hopefully parents are stepping in the gaps and saying, look, this might not be the best decision. What are you actually looking to do? Do you have a game plan? Maybe let's take a few years off and then let's go in. And I get societal pressure. I understand peer pressure. I understand the psychology of marketing. I was a marketer for 7 years. So that's why, this understanding of the behavioral psychology aspects, right? Why people buy things and what it's used for, etc. And I always did my best to be as filled with integrity. So if I was helping a company or an individual sell a brand or whatever it was, I had to make sure that I aligned with it, that it was going to be a net benefit, at least as far as I'm concerned, right? But with that, I also understand that an individual still has to make their own decision. You're marketed to every day, and there's different decisions you make that oppose that. You don't buy into every culture. You don't buy into certain degeneracy or whatever it is because you make a decision that that's not going to be beneficial for you. And so, again, we have to get back to that place. That's why I love this brother most. That's the truth that he speaks as more than just intelligence. It's a reality check to say, look, yes, there are finessers, there are these who are looking to do this. There's going to be scammers. There's going to be whatever in our society. But it's still going to come down to the decisions that we make. You vote with your dollar every single time. If you truly believe that Apple is a terrible company, you stop voting for them with your dollar. Oh, but I need it because there's no other companies. That's a choice. It's a hard truth to swallow for many people, unfortunately.
You're going to have ever more people being ever more irresponsible, as is happening now. I mean, in the wake of the mortgage crisis, they've raised the limit that the Federal Housing Administration will insure from about 360,000 to 720-some thousand. So they've doubled the policy that got us into problems in the first place.
Tom, you on personal responsibility, and you and I have talked about this before. You spent part of your boyhood in Harlem.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, most of it.
All right. Tell me a little bit about the Harlem that you knew as a boy. Was it safe at night?
Yes, and when I would wake up in the middle of the night, I would get up, get dressed, and go out to a corner newsstand where there was a little old man who was white selling newspapers in Harlem at midnight. Now today, he and I would both be taken in for mental observation. you know, you know.
How were the schools in the Harlem of your boyhood?
Oh, they were among the best in the country.
Public schools.
Public schools. Oh, I
schools.
only went to public schools. I have data on the actual test scores of kids in Harlem. They were almost identical with the kids in the Lower East Side, who were almost all white. And nobody was concerned about giving me school lunches and stuff like that. They didn't ask me whether my home was broken or not. They just told me what I was supposed to do, and they made damn sure I did it.
Do your homework, get your assignments in.
That's it.
Tom, what happened between the Harlem of your boyhood, which would be what, late 40s to the mid 50s or so?
40s. I went my first school I attended in Harlem was 1939.
Oh, real? All right. So you grew up you were there during the Second World War.
Oh, yes.
All right. So take me from the Harlem of your boyhood in this theme of personal responsibility to the Harlem of the 70s and 80s.
Oh, there you got the teachers became social workers, social theorists. They became propagandists for all kinds of new fads. And I guess the test was whether they made the teachers feel like it was exciting and it made the students feel good about themselves.
So,
of course, they end up not with no education that's worth talking about.
And what about the crime rates?
That's such a powerful point, and even a conversation that's being had right now is, what has the culture rewarded? What is the culture rewarding? What is promoted in our society, et cetera? And I remember when, TikTok was first really becoming a thing, and people were talking about how, the American side of TikTok is, people doing the little goofy dances and stuff like that. And on the Chinese side of it, the bite dance side of it, there was this emphasis on STEM and tech and, engineering and things of that nature. And do I know if that was an intentional propaganda tool? I can only assume, right? Allegedly. But I do know that without a shadow of a doubt that, again, we have created a society that rewards essentially mediocrity. It's true, right? Hot take for some reason. I don't know. I've said this a million times before. We reward mediocrity at scale. And that starts in the education system at K through 12. When you are a kid and you are now receiving a good grade because the teacher feels bad for you, or you're receiving a bump up even though you didn't earn it because you quote unquote did the work. You didn't get the correct answers. You didn't actually get to a point of understanding. And we can go into a multitude of factors as far as, well, what are we being taught and is it relevant and things of that nature? But, even just the basic education, math, science, and English, or linguistics, whatever language it may be. Hopefully it's English if you live in the United States. Just those basic fundamental aspects we're now so far behind on in comparison to the rest of the world, because instead of focusing on the ABCs, we're now focusing on the LGBs. You understand me? So it's unfortunate, but again, the outcome of that becomes what we now see. And it's usually parents who have the initiative, again, that personal accountability, parents who take the initiative to educate their kids in a different way, or at least promote certain ways of being, a different culture. These end up being the kids who end up in AP classes and advanced courses and things of that nature, right? Taking extra education or taking their education more seriously and having a direction and a pathway for it. This isn't to say you don't do the extracurriculars. I believe in giving ourselves to everything that is presented to us, right? Using all of our gifts, our talents, our skills and abilities, and grades don't necessarily determine, how good your life is going to turn out, but even just creating the discipline of, focus and a certain ethic when it comes to your work, even just basic problem solving, as opposed to being, non-resilient. Whatever, what would the word for, the lack of resilience be? Weak, flimsy, whimsical, right? An individual who just goes by the wind, who is just swayed by opinion or swayed by their feelings and emotions and things of that nature. Instead, we get to finally create a generation who is going to, again, be able to take personal accountability, not kids who get opted out. We save them from every single little thing, but instead we allow them to go through and allow them to grow through certain situations. It's going to hurt. It's going to be a test of a parent's own patience, of a parent's own, self-worth and things of that nature, to see maybe your kid going through it. And when I mean that, I'm not talking about, physically or things of that nature, but mentally, psychologically, allowing them to mature as opposed to coddling them, or trying to control them and coerce them into a certain way of being. Let them figure things out. And then we'll have adults who can figure things out. Because right now we're seeing with this far left woke, quote unquote, progressive movement, these kids are very sensitive. They are very, they're narcissistic, and they want all the attention for doing absolutely nothing, but they're also extremely sensitive. They are fractured and fragmented by the very slightest of remarks or critique or whatever it may be. And that comes as a result of just a degradation of the education system. And so we have to start in the homes, because that's where education started before, we had the Henry Fords, et cetera, having the assembly line structure of schooling. A lot of schooling was, in home. And obviously you have your classes outside the home and things of that nature. But there was a responsibility that parents took. And I understand 2 parents are working. If hopefully you have 2 parents in a house, which we should be aiming for, that should be the ideal. If it's not the situation, okay, but it should be the ideal. That should never change, right? You got 2 folks in the house. And if, okay, both parents are working, etc. Again, this comes down to, look, the society structured in a certain way. We have to make our own personal decisions individually, first and foremost. And we have to be responsible of our own household. And if this society isn't working for us, we pick it up and we go somewhere where it does. That's how I view things. Again, it baffles my mind how, everything is just blamed on everything else. It truly, truly blows my mind. Maybe it's just the wiring that I have or whatever it is. And, most people would just forever remain in a place where it's easier for them to blame. But for me, I'm like, I want different results in my life. I don't want to just be stuck. Even if I get the instant gratification and satisfaction of, pointing the finger, I would rather have a result. I'd rather feel the discomfort and get a result than, to feel soothed and to not get the result. You know what I mean? So let's just wrap this up, and I'll get back to you guys next time. Appreciate y'all.
Oh my goodness, the crime rates are much lower. I gave it
much lower when you were a boy. But
yes.
So what do you attribute the rise in crime?
Oh, the rise in the idea that we have to look for the root causes of crime rather than put the bad guys in jail.
All right. So there's the dissolution of the sense of personal responsibility that the teacher is to teach, the child is to do his homework, criminals are to be picked up and put in jail.
Yes.
Now, Harlem today is pretty safe. It has enjoyed the increase in safety, or the drop in crime rates that associated with the rest of New York that began under Rudy Giuliani. The Harlem economy is pretty robust. And Harlem is now home to some 24 charter schools. So what I'm trying to do, Tom, is cheer you up. I'm trying to...
Well, I need it.
I'm trying to point to evidence of the possibility of renewal, of rebirth. And that to suggest
I never denied that there was possibility for renewal and rebirth. So I haven't said it. In fact, even in my book, I say, the one good thing is that nothing is inevitable until it happens. But I also point out that there were periods of improvement as the Roman Empire moved toward its last days.
Right.
I used to be afraid of the dark, place unknown like a heart in their heart. I used to see my life in the bar. Now the kids unchained, every shackle is lost. 2 steps in the moonlight, 2 step in the daytime. You just know when it feel right. You got a feeling the time's not. See you through those shades that I just threw on. Through my lenses, you just can't do no wrong. I fell in love with myself again. I fell in love with myself. I fell in love with the sunshine. I fell in love with the light. I fell in love with the full moon. I fell in love with the night. I can see the light again. I can see the light.